Mazda no Yahweh, ang dustang kalagayan, ang pamana sa amin ay inagaw ng dayuhan sa gahaman na punta ang aming tahanan. Mazda no Yahweh.
It is a bit of a problem that memory is lost. The impact and the problem the turmoil of the martial law and the Marcos dictatorship in the 70s has been forgotten or has been politically eased out of the memory of the mainstream, so that people don't really know what has happened. And we have been trying to, and I think here, um, as agency is uh, invoking memories in many different ways is of prime importance. I mean, not only for a musician but a musicologist, as if one were to think of the impact of one's research on society at large in the first place.
So I guess what's interesting about our constellation is also that we have very different connections to the topic of dictatorship, right? Like
right.
me, I was born in 1981 and I have no personal connection to that, no individual memories, personal experiences of that time. But still, it was very present because we learned about it in school. So that's probably a different situation in the Philippines. It's really part of the curriculum, also to an extent that, you know, people get, well, some people are like, oh, I don't want to deal with that anymore. So we talked about it so much, you know. So it's part of the curricula, but also it was a topic in my family also, mostly because of my grandparents who were born in the late 1920s and early 1930s.
Okay, so they were in the Hitlerjugend, and
my granddad actually was, and my grandmother, she was evacuated. So she lived in the city of Essen, so a major industrial area.
Yeah.
And as a young child, she was evacuated, and then she.
Well, what do you mean evacuated? In what sense? Was she Jewish, or what do you
mean? No, she was not. She's Catholic actually, but actually they evacuated the children from the industrial centers, you know, and they were sent somewhere towards the east, like eastern Germany, Poland, in that region. So towards the end of the war, she then had to flee because of the Soviets approaching. So she always told me the story how she walked all the way back to North Rhine-Westphalia, to where the remaining parts of her family were. But yeah, I was always fascinated by that story, you know, and my grandparents, they always told me like it was such a terrible time. And my granddad, he frequently stressed like how awful the whole thing was. And I could also feel like, because he was part of these the air defense, like the kids, teenagers, they had to assist in the air defense.
Air defense.
It's called air defense. Yeah, the final stage of the war. So he was part of
so
that.
this is the what do you call this?
It's in German, it's Flakhelfer.
Yeah. I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and And I recall when my granddad, he died a couple of years ago, but I recall that this gave him nightmares. Like really, he talked about this time, and you could see that he regretted being part of that.
Yeah, but nobody had any choice. Nobody had the choice. I
So
think it was the.
it's really it's really such a such a difficult situation, and it got me thinking about thinking in terms of black and white, and how where do you have like which choices would I actually have made if I'd been in that situation. It's super, yeah, it's just very complicated. So
Yeah,
because
I
of
know.
that family history also, I have this interest in the topic of dictatorships, and
Yes.
I turned this into a research project together with Federico Spinetti here at the University of Cologne, and later on expanded to Leuphana University then when I moved from University of Cologne to Leuphana. So I've been working on that topic for quite some years now. I think I started in 2015. The project actually started in 2017.
Yes.
And it officially ended in end of 2020, but we're still, of course, still continuing with the research. So
I feel so lucky to hear this straight from you. I mean, results of this project. Can I give the floor to you actually.
So something I would like to stress before I start is that something that's very important to my research is the assumption that memory is a process and not a thing. So really looking into the processes of memory making is essential for my research. And it's also important to acknowledge that memory is something that is always made from a present perspective. So it's not simply remembering historical events, but there's an intention and purposes to it. And memory also is shaped by the current situation, and has the potential also to affect present and future. So, and also in our project, we talked a lot about the different relations between music and memory, and maybe the three most prominent ones are that music can actually serve as a medium of memory. So music can be something that's intentionally written, but it's written with the intention to remember something. So it is sort of a vehicle or a carrier of memories. So when we, for example, talk about memories, talk about songs that explicitly address the period of National Socialism, or in your case, the Marxist dictatorship. So music is a medium or a vehicle of memory. But then we also have music that was not written with that intention of remembering, but still came to serve that function through its association with certain contexts. So music can also be imbued with these meanings and become an agent of memory in that sense. And lastly, something that's also very interesting is music that becomes an object of memory. So music itself as something that is remembered. And I will address some of these dimensions also in my examples. So let me see if I can start the slides. So I brought two examples from my current research project. So this one example, I just finished an article on it. And actually both examples are taken from the city of Cologne, so from a similar context. So my first example is the group Bejerano and Microphone Mafia. And this is a group comprised of Esther Bejerano. She's a survivor of the concentration camps Auschwitz and Ravensbrück. And right next to her, you can see with the bass, you can see her son Joram. And then the other two members are Kutlu Jurtseven and Rossi Penino, and they're from one of Germany's oldest hip hop acts, actually, Microphone Mafia. So they've been around since the 1980s, basically. And they started this collaboration a bit more than 10, 12, 13 years ago already. 13 years ago, they started collaborating. And they, in their music, they rework historical anti-fascist repertoire and combine it with rap. And occasionally they also rework songs by the group Microphone Mafia. So it's really, it's a really interesting combination because they fuse the historical songs, the old, and also the new approaches, not only in terms of the materials, but also in terms of the musical styles that they combine. And I would like to give you an example of what their music sounds like, and how they, in their music, remember the time of the dictatorship and how they remember persecution by the Nazi regime in particular, so persecution of the Jewish population in this case. So I picked a song from one of their their first album, and the song is called Zu 1, 2, 3. So that song is actually, it's based on the resistance song of the same name, which is itself, so that's where it gets really complicated. You can see all the levels of remediation taking place here, of the different travels of the songs and new adaptations. So if you listen to the song, you will immediately notice that it is the melody of the Union Front song by Brecht and Eisler. So the song Zu 1, 2, 3 is itself a rewriting of the Union Front song. And the context in which it originated in is the ghetto of Vilna in Lithuania. So Leib Rosenthal, he wrote new lyrics to the melody of the Union Front song to address the situation of the Jewish inhabitants of the ghetto of Vilna. So, and in that song, he addresses the liquidation of the ghetto, and it's really about depicting the insecurities and the despair of the ghetto inhabitants who are facing deportation. So that's what the original song is about. And Bejarano and Microphone Mafia, they take this idea and also little bits and pieces from the original song and turn it into a new composition that I would claim bring the past into the present. And maybe I just play a little snippet from the song, and then I can explain a little bit about my reading of the song. And yeah, if you can feel free to comment on it or ask questions. Let me see. I'll play a little excerpt from the song.
Wir sind aufgereiht wie Vieh, ich habe Angst wie noch nie. Suche Frau und Kind, oh bitte sag mir, wo sind sie? Um mich Menschen voller Angst, ich seh verzweifelte Minen. Schergen, die uns wie Schlachtvieh aus unseren Häusern ziehen. Es ist helllichter Tag, doch es herrscht um uns Finsternis. Unsere Verzweiflung nehmen sie kalt lächelnd zur Kenntnis. Wo gestern Kinder spielten, da tanzt heute der Tod. Da wo gestern die Sonne schien, ist der Himmel blutrot. Sturm und erstarrt stehen wir in unseren Reihen. Ich höre stumme Schreie, ich höre Wimmern und Weinen. Denn mir zittern die Beine, dann der Befehl zum Marschieren. Fragende Blicke, was wird mit uns allen passieren? Wir erreichen den Bahnhof, ich höre die Züge, spür die Resignation, wie ich mich meinen Mördern füge.
So, 1, 2, 3, so, 1, 2, 3, wenn Gott uns mitkleppt wunderbar. Wo dein Freund, wo dein Kind, wo dein ganzer Gesicht, recht Freund und zu was und verwusst.
Okay, so that was a little excerpt from the song. And in the song, they also address, so similar to Leib Rosenthal, they address the deportation of the people from the ghetto, but they address it from a present perspective and also taking on the perspective of the individuals that are rounded up for deportation. So from the perspective of memory studies, I guess it's interesting because they're really suturing themselves into that historical narrative. So it's a form of prosthetic memory in the sense of Alison Landsberg. And I interviewed actually all of the band members. And Rossi, one of the rappers, he told me that when he wrote the song, like he really imagined being in that situation. So he really put himself in that place and imagined like what would it have been like for him. So putting himself in the shoes of the deported in that song.
What actually, yes, and what actually strikes me in this song here is that there's this somewhat isolated section, a middle section where you really hear the Eisler melody. I'm rather familiar with some of Eisler's most notable songs, even from the 20s. I mean, I've listened to a lot of Eisler when I was studying in Freiburg. Um, but here you find rap, and then you find this little isolated, this grunts, this, and then you have this. I think it is very effective for the for the context of it's like it's the old and the new.
Yeah.
So they're really very conscious of this old and new thing because it's very very much explicit in the structure of the song.
That's
true.
True.
Are they conscious? Yeah.
That's actually their intention, also bringing the past into the present and finding new ways of actualizing the past and making it more accessible also through these new means. So that's an intention actually of the group.
How do they look at the present in terms of the past? What do they look at parallels? How do they look at the present in terms of the past? The I could only imagine 1925 to about 1939 in Germany, in fact in Europe, the Nazi Europe. Only from pictures and maybe movies, better movies, good movies. But I couldn't imagine it how because it's not part of my cultural memory, my collective memory. But how how does the past figure out in the present in their perspective, and how is this consciously or over determinedly, you say, uh, manifested or expressed in the construction of the music?
I guess what's really essential for that group is that it's a collaboration with a Holocaust survivor. So this is also something that really establishes some sort of authority to be able to talk about these issues, and also content wise, actually their performances, it's not just about playing these songs, but when they perform, they usually have a reading of Esther Bejarano from her memoirs at the very beginning. So it's framed in that context also of the testimony. So there are actually more connections between past and present than just in the songs themselves. And you addressed also how do we learn about the past today? So, and of course, the collaboration and the exchange with the survivor is essential in this, but also media representations. So that's also one of the reasons why I picked this song, because it's very obvious that the song draws on images of collective memory of the Holocaust. So you have these images of the people rounded up on the street. You have the blue smoke rising, which clearly refers to the crematories of the concentration camps. You have the cargo trains, which have become like the symbol of the deportations. So you have all these cues in the lyrics that create these images of the Holocaust, and these are images that are already that are circulating through different media. And Rossi, one of the rappers, he told me that he especially drew on images, on media images like the film Schindler's List when writing the song. So he is very very conscious of the fact that these media images shape our view of the past, and accordingly also shape the music that keeps the memory of that period alive. So it has got these different, I would say it has these different components of the first-hand experiences and the testimony of the survivor combined with the media, with media images and collective memory here. And yeah, I talked about the images from collective memory in the lyrics already, but you can also find them in the music actually. So if you listen closely, you can, for example, hear the representations, sonic representations of the suffering of the deported, for example. At certain points, you have a sample of a size added to the song, and also the beat in itself is intended to represent the Holocaust and the deportations in particular. And let me read that out for you, because I've brought a quote also from Rossi, one of the rappers. He said, "The heavy beat is supposed to represent the heavy burden that the people carried when they marched, to the death camp." So you have the sonic representations of the deportation in the song as well. So it's on the level of lyrics, but also on the level of the music itself. And since you mentioned the present also, and how do these different time layers actually, how do they relate to each other? What's quite fascinating about this group is that it is definitely about the memory of the dictatorship, but it's not only about the memory of the dictatorship. And that becomes very visible if you apply the concept of multidirectional memory by Michael Rothberg to the example. So Michael Rothberg, he criticizes the view that memory is something that's competitive, and that in the public sphere, memories of violence will just, crowd each other out. So if Holocaust, if you pay a lot of attention to Holocaust remembrance, then, other histories of violence are marginalized. So he would disagree with that view. And he says that we should instead view memory as something that's multidirectional and that's interconnected and productive. And he says, memory is subject to ongoing negotiation, cross-referencing, and borrowing. So collective memories they can overlap, they can connect, and they emerge in dialogue. And this is exactly what the group does. They connect the memory of the Nazi dictatorship with the memory of racist attacks after the Second World War, and especially the period after the German reunification in the 1990s. So in that time period, there was a series of attacks on...
Yes, I experienced that firsthand, because I was already in Freiburg when the first attack in where was this? In the north of Germany. What was this?
It was Rostock-Lichtenhagen and...
No. It was near Lübeck, Rostock.
Yeah, Rostock. Yeah.
Yeah,
Rostock.
I was already in Germany. I was in Germany already when I heard when this happened, and everything was, I could see it on TV, and then there were protests for and against the neo-Nazis in Freiburg. In fact, it's kind of weird. The first day I arrived in Freiburg I think it was June of 1991. I went to the Goethe Institute in Freiburg, and so I registered, and I said, I'm Jonas Baes, I'm this guy. And apparently, somebody took me to my dormitory, a newly built Studentenwohnheim near the institute, but not connected directly to the building. And there was this wall there, and the first thing I saw was a graffiti which said Ausländer raus. I didn't know it. I didn't know what that was. I know Ausländer, but raus. So I brought my dictionary. I looked at literally in front of
Oh no.
I said raus, and oh shit. I said, oh man, what's happening? And I've heard of that because uh, this neo-Nazi threat. I've heard of this. In fact, immediately after the unification, you were a child during the unification. If you were born in,
Yes. Yeah.
you're a little girl. It was 89. I was there in 92, so it was still fresh. And yeah,
Yes.
I had a very close friend from the east of Germany, and apparently, yeah. And there were demonstrations. Maybe I look for the pictures. They're somewhere here, and and I said, wow, I came from the Philippines and I saw demonstrations, and I come to Germany, and again a different level of demonstrations for and against
Hmm.
the new Nazis. You know, it's like, and of course
Yes. So,
the racial scare also. I was always warned by, I had some German friends, don't stay up too late when you're out late and waiting for the Strassenbahn, because the Strassenbahn comes rather a longer periods. I have to cover myself so that I'm not seen as Asian or something like that.
and so these moments and these attacks, I guess they can be described as what Levy and Rothberg have termed, well, drawing on Walter Benjamin, moments of danger, in which the memory, the memory of fascism and of the period of the dictatorship flashes. It brings back these memories of the time, and that was very prominent in the 1990s, and that's a connection that's also that's made by the band. So the 1990s, but then also in the 2000s. I'm not sure if you heard of the National Socialist Underground, the far right terror organization.
No,
So
I didn't hear this in Lubeck. Yeah, but yeah.
there was a series of killings and bombings. Actually, 2 incidents also took place in the city of Cologne. So it turned out that this was a well, first of all, the victims were blamed. The media claimed that it was some sort of must have been about drugs or mafia or something. And later on, it turned out that it was actually a neo-Nazi terror organization that committed all of these attacks. So the example here, let me see, do I have the picture here? The example here, Herkessin Meidani, Platz für alle, that initiative, actually it's located in Kolbstrasse. That's the place where one of the attacks of the National Socialist and there is currently a huge debate going on about the memory of these events. So, and also when we talk about the attacks of the early 1990s, there is hardly any memory of it here in Germany. So most of the initiatives are really bottom-up initiatives trying to keep that memory alive.
Yeah.
And it's similar with the National Socialist Underground, actually. So the initiative Herkessin Meidani, they're struggling to set up an interactive memorial, Kolbstrasse, but they're really facing lots of challenges there from the city council and also owners of certain lots in the area where the memorial square is supposed to be established. So, and that event here took place in September last week, and they sort of they created a temporary space for remembrance, for remembering the victims of the National Socialist Underground.
But aside from that, there's been this movement. I keep on forgetting what they call this metal slabs you put in the.
Oh, the Stolpersteine.
Yeah. And I've seen many of those since the early 2000s. When I was I saw it first in Austria when I was in Salzburg, and a friend told me about it. And then I see a lot in Germany, and that's actually a very, in a way, institutionalized symbol of memory,
Yes,
uh,
yeah.
concrete, tangible, put in stone. And when I was teaching in Lübeck, the doorstep, the entrance to the Musikhochschule in Lübeck, has actually these two slabs there, two shrine, and it's because the house, I think, where the Musikhochschule in Lübeck is belong to these two families, I guess, who were taken to Auschwitz, and there's data about people. This person went to Belgium, or I mean, they it's a big project, I think, and I
Yeah,
heard that in November there are certain ceremonies here regarding. I think it's an institutionalized. It's remarkable how just the same the state institutionalizes memory through these
yeah, but
stones.
it's not a state-funded initiative,
It's
actually.
not. Oh,
It's
is
an
it?
artist. That's an artist, actually. And
Oh,
if you actually you can if you live in a street where people were deported, and
yeah.
you can collect donations. I guess it costs around
Mm-hmm.
150 euros, and have
Mm-hmm.
a Stolperstein placed
Stolperstein place
there
there.
in
Oh,
front of the
okay.
house. So what's
Who
happening
made
here?
this initiative? Who made this initiative? I thought it was a state, but who
No,
made the
it's an artist.
an artist? Oh,
He lives in Flechen. I have to look up the name.
okay.
I remember
Okay.
it later.
But
No, it's
that's a
an artist.
remarkable project. It's a remarkable
Yeah,
project.
it's not state funded. It's an
Oh,
individual
okay,
endeavor,
okay,
and he
okay. I
actually
stand corrected. Okay.
yeah. Yeah, but the Stolpersteine are an interesting example, because it really became like a medium of memory, a form of
Yeah.
remembering in itself.
In
So
in the Philippines, if I could just divert a bit, in the Philippines we have that form, but it's not those little slabs. But there is this whole. It's called Bantayog ng mga Bayani. It's a place where you have all the names of the martyrs and the victims of the martial law, and it's in fact it's near my house. It's and you have those, and my brother is one of those heroes, martyrs who's honored there. And up to the early 2000s, there were ceremonies there. Those departed, because my brother was a martyr of the Marcos dictatorship, and just the same, he wrote songs while he was in prison. So that's one of the things he did. Not
yeah.
only so instead of, and I think it helps, and again, and like in Germany, this is not state funded. This is I think civil society or a certain non-governmental organization. I forgot what organization does this, but it's still the Bantayog ng mga Bayani, and they have a website also where all the names are put there to honor the martyrs.
So who decides who gets to be part of the memorial? Is there any can
Who decides? I don't know. I don't really know how the process is, but I know when my brother died in 2006, we were approached. And I think to check on the details of his life, but apparently they know much details about his work as a um, as part of the movement against the dictatorship. And as I think they have lists of names of people who were imprisoned and people who were summarily executed. There are so many people I know, I heard of. I was a child at the time. This is direct. I mean, maybe like your grandfather, but this is the direct impact on me as a child, because I grew up to that uh, environment. The formative years of my life were actually um, were actually spent worrying uh, about martial law as a kid. I didn't understand what was happening, except that at night we were supposed to be very quiet, and I could hear these. They're called jeeps. I mean, they're called owner jeeps, and so they call them owner jeeps, but they belong to they're like the Gestapo, the CIS, Central Intelligence Service, and they go around. And I think my brother was in the list, so it was always expected that there were people always observing our house. Maybe at night we're so afraid. So at night we have to turn on all the lights, and we're so afraid. I was as a child, I was so traumatized when I hear a jeep that stops nearby our house. So when I do that, when we hear that, my sister holds on to me and said, "Just be quiet." And that's my first memory of my life. And when eventually when my brother was in prison, the prison doesn't end there. The torture doesn't end there. As my brother is in prison, even us, we were being observed. I remember coming home from school, seeing soldiers nearby our house, and even up to the time in the 1990s, whenever I see green fatigue, I get like traumatized when I see green fatigue, military uniform, or once in a while there's a guy who just comes to the house and just uh, talks to us and on weekends and eats lunch with us and just talks and talks and talks about the thing and maybe trying to find out what's happening. So we and all of those happening, and then um, I could also feel how somehow people in our neighborhood also ostracize us because the family served as a little threat maybe the to uh, the quiet of the neighborhood. So maybe because of us, because of my brother, they felt not very secure in living spaces, and I had to observe all of that as a child. I was like 7 or 6 year old. I remember I wanted to be a musician at that time, so I had already carried a music notebook, and I was learning to write notes and all that stuff. And one time, certain times we visit my brother in the prison in the stockades, and he was already writing songs at the time.
So
And I
how
remember
old was he then when he was in?
he must be around in his 20s. He must be around in his 20s because he was just a newly graduated student when martial law was declared. And when he found out, I think that he was he had to hide in the and he was being hunted down. My two brothers were also being hunted down. Uh, it's a more complex story, and so I remember the time that after the declaration of martial law, my two brothers had to stay with our relatives outside our house, and I was the only kid, and I was a kid. I was asking questions. What's happening? What's happening? Why are we like this? And it's September. We're supposed to be talking about Christmas and all that stuff, and 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 what's happening? And I remember a little later when my brother Aloysius was already imprisoned. I remember he has just composed. He was because we are a musical family, and we always had music in our family. My parents were musicians. My father comes from a family of band musicians, marching band musicians. My mother plays the organ, the harmonium for the church, and apparently we had music in the house. We had a small piano and all that stuff. We were always playing. My brother was playing Chopin. My brother who was in prison plays the guitar. We had a flute. I learned all that. I was so interested in the flute. Um, And I remember one time, I don't really remember what year that was, but I was a kid, so I was allowed to come. So I said I wanted to see my brother because the last time I saw him was before martial law, and I never saw him again. When he was in prison, I never saw him again, and I sort of, I mean, I lost him. I mean, I was, and so okay, I was allowed to go, and he asked how I was. I said I'm interested in music and all that stuff, and then he sang the song, and I realized later that one of the famous songs, which is Mutya, which is an adaptation of another revolutionary song at the turn of the 20th century by Bonifacio Abdon, where he wrote new lyrics to it. Uh, in the context of martial law, and it's about being imprisoned. And I remember he was telling me, "Can you write this down?" So I was writing it down, the melody, and he had the text, the lyrics. I remember, I remember vividly him cutting up the lyrics into small little pieces and putting it in different parts of our body and said, put that together when you get home. I didn't know why, because apparently we were inspected by the soldiers as we came in the prison, and we were even inspected even more thoroughly as we get out.
Wow.
Okay. So we couldn't, that song he wanted to, I think he was telling my other brother, let's bring this song out because uh, we can distribute the song and all that. So I think that was, so he told me to write down the melody in the notes, and I could write it. It's in 3/4, and okay, 1 2 3. Then he'd sing it, and then okay, where are you? Where are you? I was learning how to write music, and so I was writing it down in my little music notebook, and then the lyrics, the text, he cut in small pieces. He put in different parts. I remember my other brother, Josephus, who's younger than he. I'm young. Then I'm the youngest, but he comes a little older than me. And I remember sometimes he puts messages or even maybe those lyrics in the in the uh, in the nails. He sticks a
Wow.
paper, small slip of paper, and he sticks in there and all that. Or sometimes we put pieces of paper. I remember there was a priest who had a hearing problem, and he had this hearing aid, so he put paper there. And when we were inspected going out, they see my music sheet. Of course, they don't know that this is some revolutionary song I was bringing out. Uh, I would never forget that story. I would never forget that afternoon when we were going out. And I was so scared because my God, but of course, the soldiers
So what?
they don't read notes, so they don't know.
Yeah, fortunately. So what did you do with the song once you smuggled it out of the prison?
What did we do? We sang it at home. I think we recorded it on cassette, me and my brother, and we taped it. I mean, on cassette. Uh, I remember this. We had this Michael Jackson Christmas album. Okay, Michael Jackson, Jackson 5 Christmas album, and I remember we put it somewhere in the middle of the tape. We sang it there, so that we were scared that somebody might check this and hear the song. The song is obviously the song can you can be put in prison with the song. So we put into this Michael Jackson after about 10-15 minutes. This Christmas album, you have the song. I remember that very well because I said, no, we don't record from the beginning of the cassette. You move it there. And I learned later somebody might spot check us and see the tape and all that. And so the cover is it's the Jackson 5 Christmas album. I remember that vividly. You're talking of memory. I could still remember it's colored brown or something. and then so I was just watching, and we were singing. You want to hear the song?
Yes, of
Let's
course.
let's hear. This is called Mutya, and a lot of people to this generation still know the song. Actually, share computer audio. So uh, it brings up in so much. I could go into tears just listening to this, because I seldom listen to this song because it brings back so much memory. Also with my brother who died in 2006. Here is my brother Aloysius Baes,
Mhm.
and this is his citation in this in the Hall of Heroes on Bantayog ng Bayani. And well, he died in 2006 uh, when he was doing a project on the oil spills of certain islands. He's actually a physical chemist. He after he was released from prison, my parents whisked him off to the United States. He got married in the United States and got his PhD in the University of Michigan. He's actually a very he was an intelligent genius scientist as well, but he had this musical training. So this is the music here is Bonifacio Abdon, which apparently he used deliberately because he wanted to invoke the memory of the Philippine American Revolution. Okay, I'll tell you all about that later,
Yeah.
but let's listen to it first. And he put new lyrics, kay taas ng pader. He's the lyrics talks about uh, um, torture of being isolated from the country. Like his imagery, the first verse talks about the walls are so high, I couldn't see anything but a little glimpse of the sky. But I know beyond that is you, my love, rules the country.
Mhm.
And this notion, in the Philippine Revolution in the turn of the 20th century, uh, the notion of looking at the country as a loved one, a woman whom I should protect, whom I should fight for, is being carried over to this song. Okay, let's listen to this. This is a recording from I think there was sometime in the 1980s. There was this underground cassette called Mga Awit ng Revolusyong Pilipino, Songs of the Philippine Revolution, which apparently were collected from songs in the countrysides of the rebel group.
Kay taas ng pader sa aking paligid, munting pisngi ng langit ang tanging nasisilip, mutya pong tinatangis, laging naisip, pagkat pagtangis ng mutya'y lubusan kong batid. O mutyang ginigiliw, nalukob sa dalita, ang mapaligaya kay tanging ninanasa. Ang kundiman kong ito'y pagpugay sa iyong ganda, gandang namumukadkad pag wala ka ng luha. Huwag kang malungkot, sinta, sa aking pagkawalay. Ano man ang sapitin, gunita mo ay taglay. Ang lahat ng aking lakas na lalabi pang buhay sa iyong kapakanan aking ialay. Huwag kang malungkot sinta sa aking pagkawalay. Anong man ang sapitin, ngunit amo ang taglay. Ang lahat ng aking lakas na lalabi pang buhay sa iyong kapakanan aking ialay. Butihing mutya, bayan ko.
Very 19th century in style.
Is that Kundiman?
Kundiman, yeah, and Bonifacio Abdon's song is Kundiman, yeah. He told me later on when I was grew up. He always said that, you know, Jonas, you're the brother of mine I never saw grow up. So you were a kid when I left, and then when I saw you when he was released, I was already in high school. Can you imagine the long period of time we were not together? He was in hiding, and then he was in prison, and then he went to America. And then when he came back, when he came back, I was already married. I was about to go to Germany. So I never saw you grow up actually, but apparently he was. But he when we were talking about his songs, we spent afternoons talking about his songs. He told me he was trying to using that kind. So he has composed many other songs, which many of the people here in the revolutionary movement and those many people would consider as top hits of martial law. They call it jokingly, and yes, there's so many songs he wrote, and some people are surprised. So this is that my brother wrote it. And anyway, he said in his songs he tries to bring back the Kundiman as a style, as a counterculture. And you know, when he came back from America, he told me again, we have to create a counterculture, a sound that is a counterculture. He was actually referring to the Nueva Canción movement of Chile.
Interesting, yeah.
And when he came back from America, because during the martial law, none of those things ever come in the Philippines. And 1972, martial law here, and then 1973, the Pinochet regime, the Pinochet dictatorship, and which actually caused Quilapayún and Inti Illimani to be stranded in Europe. They couldn't come back, and Inti Illimani he loved very much because of its aesthetics. My brother was a true musician at heart. He hated it when the harmony is wrong. He hated it when so he grew up to that. Our family is like that. So and he loved the music of Inti Illimani. And when he came back, I said he said you should listen to this. And I remember the album Palimpsesto. It's like a whole album, which actually induced me to produce an album for, it's another story, I can tell you that later, but for that time, a very popular, a very active protest music group here in the Philippines named the Patatag. So when he was doing that, he came but before he left for the States, a little period, in the place where we were living in Los Baños, I don't know if you've been there. There's a University of the Philippines there in Los Baños.
I know where it is, but I haven't been.
Yeah, I was studying in UP Diliman in the College of Music, but I lived in Los Baños, Laguna, and
That's
in
far.
the university because it's like a, but when I couldn't stand it in Manila, I just take a bus ride home. During the time it was easy. There was no traffic. Can you believe that
Okay.
I was able to come home from Diliman to Los Baños in only an hour and a half?
Memories.
From UP Diliman to Makati took only 20 minutes. Okay,
Unbelievable.
you've not seen those days. Okay, anyway, and I remember there in Los Baños, in UP Los Baños, there was this budding group of musicians, undergrad musicians, whom actually my brother told me to be connected with. I played the flute at the time. And this group was called, I heard the group was called the Tulisanes. Okay, I don't know his direct connection to the creation of this group, because at the time he was teaching in the university in Los Baños. I was teaching chemistry. I don't know his direct connection, but somehow I found my way playing, jamming with this group, singing songs. And I was a flutist, and I became a regular member, and we were singing in rallies and singing in every. So I come to Diliman to study classical music of Beethoven and Mozart, and then alternative, fantastic music of Jose Maceda and all that stuff. And then I come home to UP Los Baños, talk about multicultural streams of experience, to play in protest rallies, the flute. And when I was playing the flute for this group, I was always scared. There were people taking pictures of us, because you get imprisoned if you're seen there at the rally. And in fact, I know one of the teachers at the College of Music who was like that, who had a part-time job of taking pictures at rallies and giving those pictures to the military. And he was a teacher at the College of Music. And anyway, so I wasn't active in Diliman, I was active in Los Baños. And apparently that group grew, and we were able to produce a lot of songs. I helped composing songs. My brother helped writing lyrics, and there was already a pool of composers. We built a repertoire. We were underground, so all the songs were anonymous, but we all helped each other somehow. And around 1981 or 82, the group produced an album, Underground. Can you imagine how it was recorded? There was a technician that comes, I don't know, maybe at 11 o'clock in the evening, and he doesn't know what's going on. We were just there. It's a church-run little studio. I think I could remember it was like they just had like a 4-track cassette, I think, there. And so we were singing these songs. We were mastering, they were mastering for there. And the album came out. I don't know the details anymore, but it was shipped out of the country and it was shipped back. When it was shipped back as an album already, it was here that we had to put the logo, assemble the logo and all that stuff. Again, the first part of the album, I don't know, Jan Travolta or something, too much. And then comes this.
What did the cover? What did the cover say? Was it also?
No, the cover. It was distributed, but eventually it was distributed as an album. It's just that it just came out that nobody knew where it came from. I still have a picture of the. My cat is calling me. I still have a picture. That's my baby cat. I still have a picture of the album cover here. There. See it?
No, it just says you started the screen sharing. There it is.
There. Harana, which is
that's also a genre.
No, Harana means it's a Filipino tradition of serenading.
Yeah, with guitar.
So it looks like a serenade, right? Yeah. I was playing the flute, so for the cover designer, I said this doesn't look like me, but but I said I recognize the way I dressed at the time. My God, I was like 16 or 7. No, that was 1970. Oh, wait. I was 18 or 17 or 18 years old, and then this. And you'll find the album on Spotify. We'll just link it maybe, you know, Harana.
Yeah, that would
But
be
this
cool.
was the first underground album, I think. It was distributed underground. And I was just fascinated by how it was produced. I wasn't in most of the sessions because I wasn't allowed to go. And it was like really, yeah, it was scary. It was scary. So it was like we were doing church songs, I think. I think church songs were the mask. If I go back to my brother Aloysius when he was imprisoned, I remember before he wrote protest songs, he was changing lyrics to standard church songs because the only gathering I think they were allowed to have in the stockade was a mass, Roman Catholic mass, and they had these for example, somebody was summarily executed, or a community was strafed, or whatever, or somebody's disappeared, somebody was tortured. They had to bring up the hope, and he wrote the songs to using liturgical songs, but changing the lyrics to more progressive texts, and I think Mucha is a product of that, in that sense. So the Tulisanes produced this Harana, but you don't even see the name of the Tulisanes here, and it was a cassette.
So did you ever get in trouble for making protest music?
They didn't know it was me. Until now, there's still some of the people, the old members, who wrote this? Just keep quiet. Oh, yes. There's one very remarkable song. There's one very remarkable song, but I have to look for it. Well, no, it's here wait, before I share it. It's called Patak ng Ulan. It's like I did not write the song actually, but it was the first song I encountered when I first joined the group, and there was a workshop, a songwriting workshop, and everybody was contingent. Somebody had a melody, somebody had a chord pattern, and I think I helped out in the chord pattern because I was more well versed in harmony. I was a student in the College of Music, and so I think you can hear it here in Spotify. We can play it probably, and I don't know. My name is not here, so I don't know who owns the copyright. I think it's the people of the Philippines who own the copyright. Can you hear it?
Yep.
Dakong silangan kung saan sisihan. api, itindig tatanaw sa dakong silangan kung saan sisikat mapulang araw ng kalayaan.
Okay, that was from 1977. and all the songs were like collectively created. I remember I composed several songs too, and I didn't know what were they were. My brother composed a lot of songs. My brother Aloysius helped a lot in the text because the text we were all students, and the text had to like go under a certain it was not really rigorous, but a certain ideological perspective, and the music is another question. If you see there, it's trying to be like the mutya. It's trying to be like the kundiman type of thing. It's I think Aloysius' idea with that notion. We were composing those things. And it was like not simply because what was the music happening at the time. Okay, we were so marginalized. Okay, what was the music happening at the time? Okay, in the popular music realm, we had the Saturday Night Fever, John Travolta, and all the Bee Gees and all that stuff happening. Or salsa. Salsa was a craze in the 70s. Everybody wants to dance the salsa. Yumir Diodato came in, but from the side of the state, I remember I was reading Heidegger, but this notion of, and we can relate this also to the Nazi regime, that dictatorships tend to also be aestheticized.
Yeah,
I could see that in Marcos. The aesthetics, the aesthetic aspect, the
yeah. You have the brutalist
images.
architecture, for example. That's the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of the period of the Marcos dictatorship. It's really
The cultural center of the Philippines is a symbol of that, and the whole Ross Boulevard. Whenever there's a you could already see the state telling the citizens what we are. That sense, and we were so marginalized. The thing is, even if we were trying to be native Kundiman, the state was also doing that. They were also doing that. So it was not really a different. The songs of Felipe de Leon, which glorified the martial law, Felipe de Leon Sr., which glorified martial law. Those two songs were also in that style, that old Filipino, that's not called Kundiman, but the old Filipinos. Yes.
So it's a way of. Would you agree that it's a way of constructing nationalism, some sort of
in nationalism in the nationalism in the perspective of the dictatorship.
Yeah.
And I saw that how that grew. The National Arts Center in Mount Makiling in Los Baños is also another symbol of that. Art centers are gravitations of this the aesthetics of this dictatorship.
Yeah, that's true. Jonas, I was wondering what happened to these songs after the dictatorship.
Okay, thank you for asking. Because I was active again. I was very active after the dictatorship. Because it really didn't end the feudal nature of the society under the Cory Aquino regime. It was just a change of personalities, but the military was still very strong. Cory Aquino declared total war against certain groups in the late 80s, and new issues surfaced. They were already there in the martial law, but they surfaced. One of them, most important, were the internal refugees,
Okay.
because the countrysides became sites of armed conflict. The countrysides became sites of
Uh,
hamleting and all that stuff.
is that especially referring to the south of the Philippines, or is it a
No,
general
even to the
problem?
north, even in Mindoro, even the countrysides, not just in the south, but in the north as well. And Aquino got made this total war policy against against the left. I wasn't with the left, but it just had so much impact. And during that time was the flourishing of low intensity conflict. So as part of the technique is that they had citizens, well, in the guise of citizens, geographical units, the CAFGUs, and they were armed. They armed the citizen groups, vigilante groups in the south and in the north. Some of them in the south even worse. So they ate brains of. They scared people. The cultists, so that those interspersed of cultist religious things and anti-communist and all that stuff and armed and it was at that time that I was I said I had to do some music for this. And that time I was working in a church institution, and I got in touch with a group called Patatag. Rodi Vera, who became a very close friend of mine up to now, who was directing that group Patatag. And they already had 2 albums because in the 1980s it became issue oriented. What was in the during the Marcos dictatorship simply collections of songs. After the Marcos era and the Cory era, it was all issues surfacing, okay, and regional issues, right? So it was fascinating also because this period of relative democracy actually allowed a little democratic space for us to be able to do these things uh, overground. I mean, not underground. So in the north, there was this group called Saridumay, who was tackling issues of the northern Philippines. In the south, Joey Ayala was very active. In Visayas, there was a group called Balitaw of Lucien Letaba, tackling issues pertaining to the region. And Patatag was based in Manila. And I remember the certain themes, theme about women, theme about internal refugees, and all that stuff. And I became active in that sense. Then I produced the album. It's an album of religious songs. I'll show you the cover. Yeah, here. There, can you see it? It's called
Yes.
Masdan O Yahweh. So it's a album of religious songs that actually talk about the plight of the most marginalized sectors of the Philippine society. So the first song is a gigantic choral piece where you have two chanters uh, uh, calling to each other about the destruction of the forest because of commercial logging and all that stuff, and then the story of the story of the Passion of Christ reflected on the life story of communities, and then into certain issues like the urban poor, internal refugees, and the militarization of the countrysides. And then the last song which is a song of hope.
So that's very similar to today, right? To today's protest music. Which
Yeah,
is
they even said when I posted and during Holy Week, because it was the can you believe the 30th anniversary of this album.
Wow.
The 30th anniversary, I posted, oh my God, I can't believe it was 30 years when we, and all my friends in the group, the Patatag was, oh yeah, and all these memories came out and all that stuff. You can see that in my Facebook. And the album is available on Spotify. And but because here we had a different, I actually was less concerned with the style of the Kundiman and all that. I wanted to explore other forms of music. I don't know what the impact of my efforts were as to the breadth of stylistic or the breadth of musical styles. I mean, of protest music at the time. But I think somehow it was effective. I composed 3 songs, arranged 2 of them. My friend Doji Fernandez made contributions, and my friend Rodney Quesada made contributions, arrangements, and all that. Upeng Galong Fernandez was a very talented musician as well. And I think you've met Doji
Yes.
in his recording studio. Yeah.
Hmm?
I don't know if he told you about the
No, he didn't.
He didn't. But he was the guitar virtuoso, and I was working with him. I was working with John McLaughlin and all that stuff. And in the studio, it just our modes of discussion shifted, not from ideological stuff, but into musical stuff. We talked about recording. I mean, it was already a different period where we were already concerned about production. I said, because I experienced somehow the Tulisanes in the early 1980s doing this underground album, and production was never really in our minds. I mean, what it sounded, you could see how the quality of the sound was in that cassette thing.
Mm-hmm.
But now we were in the studio working on a 4-inch master tape and talking about mixing, talking about panning. I mean, this was already like a development of the notion of the aspect of production at this time of protest music. And with, in fact, there was a new label coming out, and you know what it was called? Hold on, Independent Alternative.
Oh yeah, that was the 90s. Yeah, should have known. The alternative. Yeah, it was alternative, and then came the indie.
The indie, yeah. So everybody. So I think you can look at it from the perspective of equipment, because we were fascinated with the equipment in the studio, with the mixing boards and all that stuff. Protest musicians fascinated with the mixing board and all that stuff. Can I just share one of my songs from that?
Yeah.
Is it okay? Course. This is Tanglao, and it's inspired by gamelan, and the text is a wonderful text by Rodi Vera, and I sort of feel so happy about how I composed this song. It was my first time to compose again after my long absence from the Tulisanes. It was my first time to compose protest music again. And Joey Ayala was doing his stuff with the indigenous instruments. The Salidumay were doing their stuff, and the Balita were doing their stuff with their indigenous music in their area. And I wanted to do something along that line, so.
Darating ang liwanag sa ating bayan, sisikat ang araw ng kapayapaan, sama-samang salubungin ang bagong panahon, tanggapin
Yeah, it's really different in style.
It's different in style, and I was
compositions.
but in a way it was the excitement of that era. We were composing protest music. We were talking about and the ideology, and we were not missing out on any significant ideological aspects of not only in the text, not only in the lyrics, but also in the music itself. No? We want to compose singable texts. I mean, that people can then. But we were experimenting. We were exploring many things, and I was so inspired by Inti Limani at the time.
That the transnational connections are interesting also, like how do protest movements also draw either on previous protest movements or on from other national cultural contexts. So there definitely is that connection.
Yes, and apparently the protest groups sprouted like mushrooms around until the idea of protest was somehow forgotten, and it became what you saw in the 2000s.
Yeah, but my impression was it's so my last visit to the Philippines, unfortunately it's been so long because of COVID.
Yeah.
But in 2018, my impression was that protest music is very much alive.
Yeah.
And it's really diverse also in terms of the topics addressed, but also in terms of musical styles.
Yes.
So you have from the singer-songwriter to punk to lots of hip-hop also.
Yes.
It's really diverse.
I think the notion, but even in the 90s, even with us, when I was engaging with Patatag or with Patatag themselves, the notion was to explore, and not be settled with just one particular style, for example, and this actually opened doors to like hip hop and rap can come in, rap and hip hop and all that stuff, and apparently what only mattered already was the message of the song, the text of the songs, and but I was also arguing with myself, and this is my experience from my brother Aloysius, is that music itself, for me, music itself should be a statement. So if I were to use an alternative form, that itself is a statement. If I were not to use what is known around, if I were to use what is marginal, that in itself is a statement. So I don't, in my opinion, while I appreciate and I allow that the efforts of many of the groups who use these forms like rap or punk or whatever, there was in the 90s there was this double cassette album, Karapatan Pangtao, which has showcased all these groups. I used to have a copy of that, but I think I burned it. And so, it featured all this group. Patatag was included there, but it featured all these groups with all this, and somehow you see the clouding of the ideological aspects of the movement itself. But I'm not a high priest of ideology, but I'm just saying that sometimes it can cloud the very function of protest music in that sense.
But it can also be a vehicle, it can also be something like a Trojan horse.
A Trojan horse, yes, which in fact is very evident, in the example you played, but we are yet to have something like that here.
Yeah.
Which has been thought of. But that's only my opinion, and I might be speaking as a professor. That's always the danger when I'm talking now. If you were talking to an 18-year-old Jonas Baes with the Tolisanes, I might have been saying something different. But now I'm a 60-year-old person talking about this and drawing from that. But if you look at the development of Inti Limani, keep coming back to that, because and even listening to the music itself already invokes not only memory but feelings.
Yeah, that's true. It has that effective potential.
Because if that were not the case, why was it at the early years of the Pinochet regime the instruments were banned? The instruments that was used in Nueva Cancion. Why was it that Victor Hara was tortured and killed? Recognized, tortured and killed.
Yeah, that's a bit. I guess that's a.
And why is it that Inti Limani and Kilapayun couldn't come home?
Yeah, so if we talk about music, music as a vehicle of memory again, like what makes it special? I guess that affective dimension and its potential is something that's maybe not unique to music, but I guess music is capable of also connecting people and establishing effective connections to the stories that are the narratives of the music, also to historical narratives in that case. And I guess since you mentioned all of these examples, also something like joint singing can do this to a very large extent. You have that social dimension, people singing together, and it creates a bond between people.
A bond, an energy,
an activist community, or
if
community.
Years, just a few years back, maybe 2 or 3 years back, they sang this famous song. What's the title? El Pueblo Unido.
Yeah.
In Chile, to a gathering of thousands, and they were all singing. And Tino Mani was singing there in the bridge, and it was fantastic. It was fantastic. Just the music itself was already driving you into it. Something that rap might not be able to do, because, for example, rap, you have a performer doing it, and you relegate the audience into spectators watching a rap singer.
No, but it's not as.
I mean, this notion of bonding. I don't know. I'm just
But I guess it's still something that people can connect with. I guess it always depends on your own musical background.
Can you do that? Can you do that to a group of refugee can you do that to a group of indigenous people, refugees? Well, they can compose rap music. I mean, I've heard reports that they compose rap.
I have to send you a link, and maybe it's also something we can post. We can post the link to in YouTube. I was part of a project 2 years ago, and also last term I taught a class collaborating with a memorial in Ravensbrück. That was in the former women's concentration camp that hosted that event. So I stayed in Ravensbrück for a whole week, and we met survivors from the concentration camp, and we did artist workshops dealing with how does it feel for us to be at that place, and what connections do we establish to the past, and how do we make the past relevant for us personally. And I was part of a group that actually used rap. I have to say I'm not a rapper. I'm not really I don't really listen to hip hop that much personally, but I found it interesting. It was a combination of creative writing and then putting everything in the rap format. And for me, it worked surprisingly well. So we wrote a rap song actually about our encounters with Ravensbrück and the history of the place and all the contradictions that we face, because Ravensbrück, it's such a pretty place, it's located next to a lake and it's really picturesque, and then you have the horrible history, and so you're standing there facing the lake and everything looks like super nice, like straight out of a postcard. You turn around and you see the former concentration camp and the wall and the crematory, and it's really, really strange, and it made me feel so uncomfortable.
Yeah, I've seen Dachau actually, and I know how terrible it feels to even come there. It's like a museum now, but of course, in fact,
so talking museum. About rap as an approach, it works for some people, I guess. So and it can, but it always depends on your own also on your own.
No, it's actually it's a form, and it's a form of expression, and it invokes a certain contemporaneity to the expression. It can be rap, it could be other poetic forms here, and yes, the point that you have a vehicle to show the message, and that was actually the very point in the protest music movement, actually, or even in Nueva Canción, with the initial efforts of Violeta Parra in the 1950s, early 60s, to use traditional music from the Andes region, which apparently became Nueva Canción. Giving rise to groups like Quilapayún and Tiribani and Victor Hara composing his songs and all that stuff. Actually, is from this notion of creating from popular forms, and rap is no exception. It's just that I wouldn't be writing in that style. No, I'm just I know my hang up. My hang up is because I'm a composer in that sense. So, but of course, I have high respects for the form itself as a vehicle.
Yeah, but I guess music is it's not a universal thing that works for everybody in the same way.
I know, but I still believe
personal preferences, the own background, they play to that, and so what works for some people might not work for others. So it's really good that it's diverse.
I have always thought that music itself can also be a statement.
Yeah, of course.
It's not the lyrics only, but the music itself is a statement.
Music also,
But I don't know. That might be coming from my generation of the 70s, the Tulisanes, and and the 80s with Patatag and all that stuff.
Something that just came to my mind also, since we're talking about rap, I had to think of this example. Do you know the rapper Balakiet and Calix? They're from Manila. They have a song called Di Matidinak. It's about the memory of the Marcos dictatorship.
Yes.
And
wow.
An anti-historical revisionism song.
Oh yeah.
It's really interesting because it really opposes the current historical revisionism and the portrayal of the Marcos dictatorship as the golden age of history. So it is interesting that actually the idea of the memory of the dictatorship is still alive in popular music. In the example that from Germany that I showed, but also in the Philippines. So it's so multi-layered.
I haven't been following any of those developments lately here, and thank you for informing me. I might look into that. And
that's an interesting example.
Okay.
There are a number of songs actually that address the time of the dictatorship, or that.
Yes, I know. There are certain groups at the university also who do that. And I'm so happy that at least there are people who still do that. I mean, in a way.
maybe
And I
that
said,
brings us to the question that we asked at the very beginning. Why is the memory of the dictatorship still important today? Why should we talk about the memory of the dictatorship?
in my opinion, it's the dictatorship is only a manifestation of what uh, a more implicit power, the global political economy. The dictatorship is only an instrument that ensures the retention of powers outside.
Mm,
So to me, the dictatorship is only that instrument. But what is really going on is like in the Marcos dictatorship. Of course, it's these gigantic uh, in fact, multinational corporations coming into especially the forest. I was more concerned with the indigenous peoples at the time than with the other, more than because they feel the impact so much. The forests being converted into commercial logging and commercial mining sites, and the impact on the indigenous people who have to flee, even up to early in 2003, 2004, or even lately.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, it's
so
still
that I think the dictatorship is yes, we can talk about that, but it's more what is underneath. The dictatorship
happening.
will be there will be dictatorships and dictatorships, but what is inside there? But even in the
Yeah,
Cory times, it was still there. This neo-feudal uh, society, this this the global political economy, which empowers the neo-feudal or the feudal system here. We remained feudal from the Spanish time. We never grew out of that. So even our
mm,
political system, even our not only our political system, but economic system is very feudal. It's
yeah.
still the ruling class and the working class with a little stench of the middle class there.
So it's also about the period of colonialism and the how it continues,
Because
although
yeah,
it's officially no
dictatorships,
longer there, but
yeah,
in fact it is.
dictatorships will fail. I mean that dictatorship will fail, will fade, but this thing underlying it, and I saw that in the transition into the Cory regime.
Yeah,
I saw that
yeah. I
the
think in the
same people were there, the same
mm,
structures were there.
I I share this point that it's important to look at the continuities also. So in the German context, something that I noted and something that I'm very critical of is, some people say that it was just that period between 1933 and 1945. And then that was the end of the dictatorship. Now, we live in a democracy, everything is fine. But if you take a closer look, you will see that this is actually not the case. There's so many continuities actually after the end of the war that can be felt up to the present day. And the example that I showed today, I guess it's a very good example because they highlight these continuities of how the time of National Socialism and how also the failures in the 1990s, the resurgence of the racist attacks and the way that these were dealt with in by the authorities, but also on a broader scale, and the National Socialist underground, all these things, how these are actually continuities, and but continuities that many people do not want to see. So music is a way of also making this visible, and it goes back even, I guess. So racism didn't come into being with National Socialism. It has been there
Yes,
before.
the
And
19th
the huge
century. Yeah.
problem of Germany, I guess, is also the unwillingness.
Particularly, is it particularly anti-Semitism in the German context?
No,
Is it
not
not really like that? Oh, okay.
not only. So anti-Semitism is part of it, but it's
Yeah.
not the only,
Oh,
the only side of, it's only one side of racism, but it's a
oh.
much larger it's a much larger issue. And I guess it has to do also something with, colonialism. There is definitely a connection between German colonialism and between the time of National Socialism. Like even the concentration camps, they had predecessors in the colonial times,
yes,
And
Hamlets.
this is
In the
something
Philippines, they were called Hamlets. Yeah.
that's not acknowledged and that people do not really want to talk about. So last year we had a huge debate in Germany about also the colonial statues, for example, the monuments from colonial times.
Yeah.
And there were many initiatives that claimed that these should finally be removed because they're still celebrated by some people or uncritically looked at.
Yeah.
So many people don't even know that Germany has a colonial past. So yeah, I think it's important to talk about these continuities, not just the time of the dictatorship. I guess made these made it very visible, but we also have to show that there are these continuities before and after, and it's not just an isolated period.
And in fact, I don't think it'll end. It's a global world order. I think the global world order actually allows it, empowers it. In fact,
that's true. Yeah.
But particularly with dictatorships, I think we can only see the surface of it, and of course we deal with personalities. Hitler in your case, or Marcos in my case. But what was beneath that? But I don't know what was beneath, and I wasn't very sure about the structure of the Nazi regime. It was a time where it was really crazy, but everything was. That was my impression. Everything was like relegated into this to Hitler. The Führer was like a god, and then he has the SS. Who is that the structure? Yeah, the elite SS who
paramilitary groups, and he basically established like a parallel structure which then took over.
Okay.
Yeah, the SS.
So the real group that calls the shots were the SS and the Gestapo, right? I mean the brown shirts, or
yeah, these were the ones most visible, I guess, but so many people were actually involved in that.
Okay.
So I guess it's complicated. Also, the people who just looked away or just tolerated
looked away. Yeah.
Part of it as well, although they were not formally organized in either the SS or the Gestapo, or were not part of the Wehrmacht. Group. So yeah.
Oh, okay. And the resistance movements, underground movements. I know this jazz. I know this this jazz group in Hamburg who were imprisoned.
Yeah,
did I get the story right?
Imprisoned to the prison in Moringen. I was there in Moringen and at the memorial a while ago. Yeah, that's where some of the swing youth were.
Swing youth, yeah.
Maybe I can show you a picture here from the city of Cologne about the resistance.
Sure.
Does it work? Can you see it already? Hold on. What am I doing? So there it is.
They're sharing it.
Here it is. Well, actually, a topic that has only recently come to the attention is the non-conforming youth, like unangepasste Jugendliche. The time of National Socialism, and here in Cologne we had a group called Edelweiss-Piraten. So the
Edelweiss-Piraten.
And they're part of this phenomenon of the non-conforming youth. So these organizations, they were basically could be found in all urban areas in Germany during the time of National Socialism. So during the period of World War II in Cologne, it was the Edelweiss-Piraten, and they were inspired by the Scout movement, so the Bündische Jugend, and they went on hikes and played the guitar, and they just hung out. And some of them were political and would qualify as resistance fighters in a narrower sense, but others just didn't want to be part of the Hitler Youth. At that time, it was still a criminal offense to not be part of this, and to go on a hike could actually get you to jail. And there are a couple of instances actually where people were imprisoned because they went on a hike and played the guitar. So yeah, really unbelievable from a present perspective. And after the war, actually, the Edelweiss-Piraten, they were still stigmatized in Germany. So they were not recognized as resistance fighters or as victims of the Nazi regime. And it was only in 2003 when this changed. So that's really shocking. And the NS Documentation Center here in Cologne, I can show you the book here. They had a project in the early 2000s.
Okay.
Where they, brought together surviving Edelweiss-Piraten and musicians from the music scene here. And this actually was inspired a music festival. So starting in 2005, there has been a yearly festival which commemorates the youth resistance and the Edelweiss-Piraten. And if we have still time, I can show you a short video.
Is it okay to show it here? I mean, or copyright? Sure.
You can show, I filmed
Please, we have time. We have time.
Schmäh mit dem Fliegen, teilen wir mit dem Bass. Still, still, mit dem Bass. Oi, 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 spielst du mir heute mit dem Bass.
Der Sog der Interessen reißt schwere Probleme in die Tiefen konkurrierender Wertesysteme. Fischer, die mit ihren Netzen auf den Grund gelangen, präsentieren auf lokalen Märkten ihren bunten Fang, Perlen vor die Säue.
Das Schönste war schon all die lange Jahre.
In Spanien kämpften wir mit Stieren, das die Toreros blass vor Neid. In Indien stahlen wir Fakiren, den letzten Ländern Schutz vom Leib. Oh Savaloni, hau ins Revier, Herr Molino, schenk uns Bier. Ja, ja, die Erde ist der rechte Schuh, der Himmel ist der Hut dazu. Von Rio de Janeiro, ahoy caballero, Edelweiss Piraten sind Rio de Janeiro, ahoy caballero, Edelweiss Piraten sind
That was fantastic. Yeah.
Some of the songs are actually songs that also used to be sung by the Edelweiss-Piraten.
Oh, okay.
So that's music as an object of, the music itself is remembered, not only
Remember, it's an object. Yeah, precisely. which I think is happening also with certain songs of the 70s, which already became objects of well, certain remembering celebrations here, like this year. 15 no sorry 20 15 20 2021 is also the 50th anniversary of the Diliman Commune, this movement in 1971 here in the university, and certain songs came out, like Mucha was one of them, and all that stuff, and of course music is this object which is used to invoke memory for people, and also to inspire knowledge and create new memories for another generation who didn't experience this, I guess.
Yeah.
So yes, I think sometimes they're, yeah, you were the Ada Vice Pirata, and they were marginalized in a sense because you said they were not recognized afterwards. So they were like
oh, not at all. They were considered petty criminals. And in the 1980s, there was actually a huge debate involving some historians also, where it was sparked actually by the family of towards the end of the war. A number of Edelweiss Piraten were part of a group that was publicly executed in Ehrenfeld. So, and one of the family members of
executed by the Nazis, by the SS, by the Gestapo.
Right, and so one of the family members brought up this issue on that the person should be considered a victim of the Nazi regime. Brought it up in a television interview, I guess, or report, and this sparked this whole debate. And so in the 1980s, people finally started talking about the topic, but it was not until 2003 until they came to a decision. So yeah, it's quite scary, because I mean 2003, these people were born, when were they born? In like the late 1920s?
20s, yeah.
1930s, something like that.
Yeah.
Many of them were already dead in 2003. So it's really depressing. So you can, and it probably has to do with the fact that these were also working class youth. So, who is remembered and who is forgotten? These hierarchies also come into play, and it's more, obviously in Germany there has been more focus on the memory of from the church, for example, where the student resistance was not, working class. Probably also because, it gives, if working class youth could resist the Nazi regime, other people could have done the same. I mean,
yes.
highly educated students, people with a privileged background. So there's this suspicion that maybe that was also part of the reason why it was kind of swept under the rug and not.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I hope things get better. We're under another dictatorship, the dictatorship of the COVID.
Oh, wow, yeah.
But we're trying our best to be productive, and also trying our best to reach out to people in this way. And I think discussions like this are very helpful, especially with I don't know what the impact of such a discussion we had today would be on, in a world that is mostly concerned with the COVID. I mean, that's different. It's a different dictator, actually.
It's again connected. Like here in Germany, for example, COVID also, it's been, it's also used by the far right, So they instrumentalize it clearly. So it's connected. So
yes,
it's incorporated into a racist rhetoric.
Okay. I see your point. Yes, and waves of racism in the United States and in, elsewhere in Europe, maybe it's and they can always make reference to COVID again as a
Yeah, the way that, for example, Donald Trump used to talk about the constantly referring to, what did you say, the Chinese plague or something? It's like,
yeah.
it's utterly racist. You know, it's
precisely, and the impact on the thing about racism is that you are lumped into the imagination of the more powerful sector as something. This notion of difference is what drives this racism.
Yeah.
I remember again in Germany, when we were a group as Filipinos coming together. There were some people who call out to us, "Hey, Japana," because we were brown and everybody who was brown was a Japanese or. But they were kind to Japanese people because they thought the Japanese people were rich and or Vietnamese. So it was like the mapping out of peoples of races. That was an impetus in the minds of the power structures that empower this ism, this racism thing. So it was simply white against everybody, something like that. And I remember I was joking at the time. What if time comes when even among the whites there would be racism? Okay, so the blondes are the more elite ones, and the brunettes are the brunettes are more marginalized.
Classism, there's also sexism, you know,
Sexism, yeah.
It's all the same.
But how was the racist agenda of the Nazi regime sort of justified or operationalized in a sense?
I guess the sciences played a huge part in that.
Yeah, there were certain. I can remember the name. This guy.
It was pseudo-scientific, and I guess the scientists that didn't follow that paradigm, they left the country and were no longer allowed to conduct the research. And
yeah, because I studied in Freiburg. Yeah, I studied in Freiburg, and Freiburg is the city of Martin Heidegger, who was very much associated with the Nazi regime.
Yeah,
and how Husserl was like east out of the university of the Alberts Ludwigs Universität in Freiburg, and Heidegger was sort of in charge or something like that. I mean,
and there are also very shocking continuities after the war. For example, the pseudo-scientific experiments with the Sinti and Roma, for example, where I guess they took pictures of people and measured the heads and everything, and tried to establish and show how these people are different from other people.
Yes.
The people who were the people behind this, they continued after the war.
Wow.
They faced many consequences.
Wow.
It's shocking. It's really shocking. So I guess the time of National Socialism, it had a major impact on the whole on science and the academe. And
yes.
Also after the end of the war, it was not gone. You can see the continuities, the personal continuities, but also in terms of thinking. You can see that for quite a long time. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
that's
speaking
the topic of another talk.
Yeah, precisely, and well, at least it doesn't end here. We we continue talking, actually, Monika, we can make a whole series for a year of different things we can think about. Let's make this a habit.
This was also an act of memory making in itself.
Yes, precisely. Yeah, how the COVID itself created the conditions for this kind of production and all that stuff, and so it continues on. And
by the context, and that's why we're in this online setting, right?
Yeah. We could just put up a seminar in UP or in Lueneburg in a conference, just talking, facing each other. I mean, yeah, right. Great. I think we covered so much ground today, and fascinating. And thank you for your lecture.
Yeah, thank you for this interesting insights. And I took a couple of notes. I'll look up all that music later.
Oh yeah. I'll link some of them when we publish the video. And it was a great pleasure talking with you again. We are still continuing. We'll think of the next topic to talk about. Monika, you could be a constant guest in the Composers Lab in this sense, because we learned so much from you, the young composers of Southeast Asia, and the musicians. We learned so much from your insights.
I learned a lot as well. So
we're having another one upcoming about liveness, which I think is also appropriate to this present COVID dictatorship, which is happening globally, and this will come out soon. Also, maybe probably next month or something, we could schedule that. So it has been a great time being with you, discussing with you. Thank you very much for sharing your materials and your resources, and we'll see each other again. Thank you.
Wir sind aufgereiht wie Vieh, ich habe Angst wie noch nie. Suche Frau und Kind, oh bitte sag mir, wo sind sie? Um mich Menschen voller Angst, ich seh verzweifelte Minen. Schergen, die uns wie Schlachtvieh aus unseren Häusern ziehen. Es ist helllichter Tag, doch es herrscht um uns Finsternis. Unsere Verzweiflung nehmen sie kalt lächelnd zur Kenntnis. Wo gestern Kinder spielten, da tanzt heute der Tod. Da wo gestern die Sonne schien, ist der Himmel blutrot. Stumm und erstarrt stehen wir in unseren Reihen. Ich höre stumme Schreie, ich höre